have another Mother's Day card that I cased from the catalog, and I used some of the products in the catalog, the annual catalog, to make this card. I used the 1.5 inch circle punch, the scalloped lace trim. I used a piece of that. The Grosgain ribbon in Grapefruit Grove, which is one of the in colors that will be retiring from the 2019-2020 annual catalog. I also am using the flower stamps and some other word stamps from the Tea Together stamp set. I also used the rectangle stitched framelits and the Subtles embossing folder for this card. Some of the other pieces that I used are the Coastal Cabana cardstock, and I cut this at 8.5 by 5.5, scored it at 4 1/4 to create the base. I cut a piece of Whisper White cardstock for the inside, 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. I cut a piece of the gold foil at 3 3/8 inch by 4 3/8 inch, and then I ran this through the embossing Subtles embossing folder to give it that kind of a, I kind of look at it like a wallpaper effect. And then I also cut a piece of watercolor paper with the stitched rectangle dies, and that's what we're going to be coloring on and stamping and embossing on. We will also be using an aqua painter for this technique today. So the 1.5 inch circle punch is what I use to punch out a Whisper White circle for the Mother's Day sentiment. So what I wanted to start with is using the Versamark ink. I took the largest flower from the Tea Together set, and I stamped that randomly on this piece of watercolor paper. First, I used the embossing buddy to get rid of any oils or smudges, smears that might be on that paper. The Versamark ink is a slow drying ink, so it will be able to stay wet longer, so that we can use the embossing powder on it. I'm just kind of randomly, and it's hard to see on the camera, the it's kind of a see-through translucent image. And I'm going to take a scrap piece of Whisper or any kind of white paper to put under there, and then just sprinkle the embossing powder all over the front. That way we can be sure that we get everything. This embossing powder does go a long ways. Because we can put it back in what we don't use. And I'm also going to stamp the Mother's Day sentiment on the circle. side in the Versamark because I wanted to have a gold sentiment as well. And I will pour this back in to be used later. Let me set those off to the side. And I watched a fellow demonstrator, Michelle Wright, had made some of these cardboard that she covered in aluminum foil, and I really like that idea, and it does help in my classes for people to be able to hold on to these so they don't move around too much. And I'm going to go ahead and use the heat tool to heat up the embossing powder, and I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it, but as it heats up, it does turn more of the shiny color. So you'll be able to see that happen. It's always fun to work with embossing powders, and it never gets old to be able to see when it changes. And I know that when I have it in my classes, it's something that everyone really enjoys using and seeing how it becomes kind of alive. Okay. And I'm using embossing powder for the watercolor paper because I want to be able to color in the image without having it leak over into another area. So the colors that I chose to work with is the Grapefruit Grove for the flowers, and I also try to squeeze the center of the ink pads to get a little bit of ink. It's a little bit harder with the newer ones than with the older ones. I'm using Mint Macaron for the leaves, and then Coastal Cabana for the kind of background. The lids kind of make a really nice palette. Another thing that you can do, let me get my stamp chamois so that I can clean off one of these stamps here, because you can just take and put your block in the ink pad and it will put ink on there that you can use for a palette as well. So I just squeezed the barrel of the aqua painter a little bit to get a little bit of water on the brush, and then I kind of wet the areas a little bit where I'm wanting to place that, and then I grab some of the ink. You can add a little bit of water to that if you'd like to kind of make it a little more watercolory, and it's always best to start lighter and then you can add more later for shading and getting it darker, but it's hard to take it away once you've added it. And I kind of wanted to start with this because you'll need to let this dry while you're doing some of the other areas. I have quite a bit of water on this ink, so it's kind of able to move around. And in order to clean the aqua painter, you just kind of keep wiping it until it goes clear, and then it is clean. I'm going to wipe this block off. And then I'm going to use the mint macaron. I do have some ink in the lid of this one. And I just kind of wanted a little bit more of a subtle green. So you get those. That looks like I missed one of the flowers. I wasn't paying attention. So I can go back in here, get some more of that grapefruit grove. And you can do any color combinations that you want. I have been looking a lot on Pinterest and seeing a lot of people will compare the colors in the catalog with the flowers or butterflies or whatever, and kind of come up with some of the nature's combinations for the color combinations, because sometimes that's the hardest part for any of us, is which colors will work best together. And then I just kind of went between the flowers to create this other space. And the embossed images kind of help to keep some of the water from cross-contaminating, but of course if you go over, it does kind of go into those areas. But now these aqua painters, the ones that are like the ones I'm using right now, will be retiring in the current 2019-20 catalog, primarily because a new product is coming out that will take its place. So if you see it on the retiring list, know that there is going to be something else, but these are a really great tool to have in your tool bag that you carry with you. It's a really good way of using your ink pads to create watercolored looks. And some people I've watched several other demonstrators, and some of them will actually fill the barrel with, instead of water, they'll put alcohol in it, because alcohol does dry faster than the water. And so if you're going to do that, I would definitely mark which ones have alcohol on the barrel and designate which ones are water and which ones are alcohol, so that some of the other products that you use may not work as well using the alcohol. So I should have had a piece that was already done, and I didn't even think about it until I started coloring. So you can color along with me. I am new to blogging and doing YouTube videos. I'm trying to learn some new things, especially during this time of self-isolating in time with the COVID viral and mandates from governors and health and city officials. And so in order to reach out to some of my customers who are not able to attend my classes, I decided to start doing some videos, and so I'm kind of learning as I go. I did start a blog, and I am new to that. Also, I do work a full-time job outside of this Stampin' Up, and so I may not be as diligent and update my blog as readily as some of the other demonstrators out there that this is their full-time job, but I am trying. So I'm going to set this off to the side to dry. And move the inks off. I am going to bring back the Grapefruit Grove because I do want to do some stamping for the inside. And I'm choosing some of the images and sentiments from the Tea Together that I just really love. It's something really nice for a mother and daughter. Even if you don't really like the teapot and teacup, there's still some really nice sentiments, and I really love the font in here. But this sentiment says, "Our love is one that covers years through life's joys and sometimes tears, a bond that stands the test of time, mother and daughter, hearts entwined." And there also is this other little flower image that I am kind of just putting on here off to the sides. I did stamp that a little bit crooked. I'm going to try again. I think the problem is that the sticker got on a little bit crooked, so it kind of threw me off. But I did line it up with the block so that if the block was straight, then it would be straight. So there is that piece. Now, on my example, I wasn't paying attention, and I put the ribbon, the lace trim, I mean, where I thought it should go, but when I went back and looked at the catalog, it was actually in a different place. So I'm going to start by adhering this inside piece to the inside of the card. This one has mostly just the stamping, a little bit of coloring, and then placing these images here. Now, if this is taking a little bit long to dry, you can kind of hit it with the heat tool to help it dry. Just know that it could curl the paper a little bit, so you may want to turn it over and heat it from the back side as well. So this time I cut the foil piece larger because when I went back and looked at the catalog, this piece of lace trim was actually in between these instead of behind that like I had thought it was. So I changed it up a little bit when I was creating these cards for my regular stamp class that I hold, and then I come in and I just kind of adhere that, and then with my snips I just trim off the ends. And then I glued this down to here. And then to the front of the card. And then I just kind of took some of this Grow Gain ribbon and kind of zigzagged it. And you can do this how you want. I just kind of stuck a little bit of adhesive and then worked this where I wanted it to be. And then I popped these up with the dimensionals to create a little bit of depth. Onto the ribbon. Then you can always come back and trim up your ends. And that was the casing the catalog and creating something easy and fast for our mothers. I know that my mother loved roses, and so she would have loved to have received this card. And so please subscribe to my channel and check out my blog. Thank you.